So, as I was saying, our first story of the day is an update on the Ukraine war. I think many of you, my listeners, know my position on this specific war, as I have looked at that before. So, please refer to that. It will help you understand more about this conflict, what is at stake for Russia, what is at stake for Ukraine, and what is at stake also for the other power brokers like the United States, China, or even the the EU and the UK. So please check them out, and I think that you'll find that very informative. So we're gonna go straight into it, and then I'll get back to it.
Exclusive reporting by NBC News about the war in Ukraine. We've learned that a group of former U.S. officials held secret talks with the Russians back in April about bringing the conflict to an end. That's according to a group of former and current officials who were briefed on those discussions. NBC News foreign correspondent Josh Letterman broke this story. Joins us now. Josh, good to have you with us. So walk us through what you've learned about this meeting. Who was involved? What was discussed?
Well, Joe, in addition to Russia's top diplomat, Sergei Lavrov, this meeting included several former U.S. officials with deep experience from their time at the State Department, the White House, and the Pentagon, dealing not only with Russia and the former Soviet Union, but also with European issues. It also included Richard Haass, who's the outgoing president of the Council on Foreign Relations, a very prominent face of American foreign policy expertise. And we're told that on the agenda for this meeting was really finding potential off-ramps to the war in Ukraine, discussing what the reactions might be in Moscow and Washington to potential ways to move the war into ultimately peace talks that could bring an end to the hostilities. And we're told that this is one high-level example of this type of back-channel diplomacy that has been going on for some time now, involving former U.S. officials and Russians perceived to be close to the Kremlin, trying to really feel out potential solutions and engage in the kinds of conversations that are hard for the governments right now to have directly.
Yes, I mean, what's key here is these are private citizens, not in government. It's also known as track 2 diplomacy. Right. How common is this type of negotiation? Why was it preferred in this case?
Well, we should point out that these negotiations are not happening on behalf of the Biden administration. The White House is aware that these private citizens, as you pointed out, are having these discussions. They were briefed after that meeting with Lavrov in New York by the participants in that meeting about just what went on. But these citizens are doing this really on their own, and that tends to be the whole purpose of track 2 diplomacy, is that when you have private citizens who can sort of pass information to the government about what they're hearing, there is sometimes more flexibility when you have this informal, casual discussions than when you've got two governments sitting across the table for each other. Sometimes it's actually more difficult to break away from your talking points and really get to the meat of what potential solutions to tricky diplomatic issues could be. And so that is what these former U.S. officials are trying to do, really test the waters for potential solutions that could later be brought to track 1, to direct negotiations involving Russia, the United States, and of course the government of Ukraine.
So still, Josh, we understand not everyone in the diplomatic and national security communities approved of this meeting. Why was it so divisive?
Well, the concern here, Joe, is that this could undercut the Biden administration's longstanding mantra of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, right? A lot of former officials and foreign policy experts have raised concerns about whether this at least creates the appearance of the U.S. or its intermediaries and Russia in the back room cutting deals that Ukraine is not directly involved in. In fact, Ukrainian officials have responded to our reporting saying that they too have that concern, that they don't want to see anybody discussing Ukraine at a table where they do not have a seat. And so the concern is whether that could potentially undermine Ukraine's ultimate leverage in peace talks as the U.S. and its allies are really starting to show that they are eager for this war to move into a different phase where we're actually talking about peace negotiations by the end of the year, Joe.
All right, great reporting, Josh.
So there you have it. You heard it for yourselves. So what's my take? I am really glad to hear about it. I think there is no other issue, no other off-ramp for other than for this war to end, really, because both sides are registering like massive casualty, even more so on the Ukrainian side. I mean, the number of people who have died, the soldiers who have died, is anywhere between 220 to 250,000. Like those are conservative estimates, they say. In terms of the civilians' life, they're talking anything between 15,000 to 30,000 people who may have died, who are missing in action. Um, so it really is a mess. Okay, there is no other way of putting it. It's a complete mess. But what baffles me really is that it has taken them this long because they knew right from the beginning all these people from the UK, from the US, and or even from Brussels, from France, from Germany, all of them. They knew there was no way that the Russian will ever let Ukraine join NATO. The foreign policy establishment, both in the US, had been talking about that for at least 25 years. The last time, even President Obama in 2014 said that the US did not have any strategic interest in Ukraine. And yet, here we are. We're in a situation where people are dying unnecessarily. And I think the people who are ultimately responsible for that have a responsibility to bring this war to an end. Because and I've also read more recently that BlackRock, and for those of you who don't know, BlackRock is this massive conglomerate, very involved in asset management. So they're an American company, but they have their own shares of many multinationals, so from the media, so they can control what you hear and what you see from the news. They control your entertainment. So think about Disney, for example. They have massive ownership, stakeholder. They are a massive stakeholder in Disney in terms of your movie and all the things that they're pushing. Things like ESG scores for companies. I think I'll do a video on that at some point in the future. And they also even own. They have also stakes in the biggest Russian, the top 10 Russian companies. So really, as far as I'm concerned, this war is just a farce. I'm not going to lie to you. It's just a farce so that some of those people can make money while they are busy sacrificing Ukrainians. Okay, so for those of you who may not know, before the war, the country had roughly between 37 and 38 million people. As we speak today, there's only about 18 million people left in the country. Okay, the majority of the agricultural production, especially in the Donbass region. I think I've done the video to explain why those were strategically important to Russia, for example, and to Ukraine for that matter, in terms of the resources that are available, and which also explained why the Ukrainian really thought that if they can hold on to Bakhmut for a while, that will give them even the moral boost that they needed to boost their morale and hopefully and help them in the counteroffensive. But hey, as you've seen, doesn't really work. So it hasn't worked out very well for them. So the point that I'm making is that sadly, a lot of people are dying, while the people who actually sought to create this issue, they don't have to send their kids to die. They don't have to send their husband to die into this war. They can make money. Like I said, with a company like BlackRock now wants to move to a different phase in the conflict, really, because they realize that Ukraine has been destroyed severely enough that what's coming in terms of reconstruction, they know for sure that now they can make money. So this the world we live in here today, and it is really really sad. It is really, really sad. Um, but I'm actually not surprised. I'm actually not surprised because uh, the Ukrainians should know that it is not the first time that Western countries really have done that. So, for those of you who need a history lesson, so let's hear. Um, this is going to be Madeleine Albright. It's a thing from the 90s,
We have
and
heard
yeah.
that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
So, like as I was saying, you heard it for yourselves. 500,000 kids. That was in 96. Yeah, we can sacrifice them. It's okay. Nobody cares, right? Right now. But 200,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers. Dead. Okay? About 20 to 30,000 civilians, they say. Could be more with every passing month. Um, so it's really a mess, and it's sad that we sadly live in a world where war brings money to people, and so as long as that is how the world works, well, they will continue to sacrifice people. I'm afraid it's disgusting, but it's the reality of living in this world. But the people who are uh, somehow talking about this war all the time have no regard whatsoever for human life. If they did, they would not be pushing for this war to happen. But nevertheless, I'm glad to hear that there is progress, at least finally on that front. And then my hope is that this war will eventually end by the end of this year, so that both sides, and whether the Ukrainian especially, they can start to rebuild their own country. But honestly, it also sends alarm bells for me because I know I'm asking myself, what's next? Is there going to be Iran, the next theater of the fight? Is there going to be China? I believe it's going to be one of those, either Iran or China will be the next war. But that is the reality. Once they've exhausted all possibility, and there isn't more Ukrainians, sadly, to sacrifice, well, they will move on, and they will find someone else to sacrifice, and then so on and so forth. So there we go. So that is it for me for this topic. And so now we're going to move on to another topic, and that is going to be related to the story that is making the news, especially in the entertainment, as it relates to the movie The Sound of Freedom. Some of you may have heard of it. So stick around, and we're going to look at that next. Thank you.